This story is about a boy called Joseph. Now, Joseph had lots of brothers, and their father was called Jacob. Now, Jacob liked Joseph the best, and so, by a way to show Joseph how much he liked him, he brought him this technicoloured coat with all of these rainbow colours on. Now, Joseph knew that he was the most important brother out of all of the brothers to Jacob. Now, Jacob had lots of sons, and Joseph's brothers were a bit jealous of Joseph. They didn't understand why Joseph was their father's favourite, and this gave them some broken love feelings. They didn't like it that Joseph was treated in a special way by giving him this coat. Now, there was another thing that they didn't like about Joseph, and that was because Joseph used to show off a bit, which in a way was showing broken love, even though the things that he was showing off about were actually true things. But at the time, the brothers didn't know this. Joseph would have dreams, and in the dreams, Joseph would dream that his brothers would be bowing down to him, like he was important and they were in some way less important. And the thing is, Joseph told his brothers about these dreams, and he said, "I had a dream, and in my dream you were all bowing down to me." Well, that just made Joseph's brothers even more cross and angry with him. One day, whilst Jacob and Joseph were back at home, the brothers had gone to work out in the fields. They were looking after the animals, and Jacob, Joseph's father, sent him to go and check on them. So Joseph went to find them in the fields, and when he saw them, the brothers felt full of rage and anger, and they wanted to do something that showed a lot of broken love. So they took hold of Joseph and they threw him into a hole. Now, they thought and they talked to each other about what to do, whether they should leave Joseph in there, whether they should pretend that he had died. But in the end, one of the brothers felt sorry for Joseph and said, "Well, we don't really want to kill him, because if he stays down the hole, he might get eaten by an animal or something." So instead, they decided that they would sell Joseph to be a slave. So Joseph wasn't going to go home with them anymore. He was taken out of the hole and he was sold to be a slave. So that's what happened. Because of the broken love that they showed to Joseph, they sold him, and he was taken to live in a land called Egypt, and he was taken away there and he would be kept as a slave. And the brothers got given some money for Joseph, and then they went back to their father and they said to him, they lied, they told a lie, so they did a bit more broken love by telling a lie, and they said to their father Jacob that sadly Joseph had been killed. And oh my goodness, remember, Jacob loved Joseph so much. He was his favourite son, so you can imagine how sad Jacob was to hear this news. And Joseph was a slave for a man called Potiphar. And very sadly, Potiphar's wife decided to tell lies about Joseph that got Joseph into trouble, and so he didn't live with Potiphar anymore. He got taken to prison. Now, do you remember, Joseph was able to tell all about dreams and what dreams meant? Well, whilst Joseph was in prison, he helped people to understand their dreams. And so the guards, they knew that Joseph had something very special about him, that he could explain what dreams meant. And at this time, the king, who was called Pharaoh, he was having some dreams and he didn't understand what they meant. And so one of the guards said, I know a man called Joseph who's in prison and he can understand dreams. And so the king sent for him at once. And you know, Joseph helped the king to understand what his dreams meant. The king had had dreams that said that there was going to be 7 years where there'd be lots of harvest, lots of food, and then 7 years where there'd be none. And so Joseph said they must store up the food in sacks whilst there was plenty, so that there was plenty of food for when all of the food had run out, when it was the time for the drought, which means that there'd be no water so the crops wouldn't grow. And so this is exactly what they did in Egypt. In Egypt, the Pharaoh was so pleased with Joseph, he became his best friend. And Joseph became an important person in the kingdom, and he would have important jobs to do. And everybody really respected Joseph because he could help to understand their dreams. Now, of course, when the time of the famine came, where there was no food, in Egypt they had plenty because they'd stored it up in their sacks. But back at home, where Jacob, Joseph's father, and his brothers were living, in the land of Canaan, they'd run out of food and they were stuck. And so what they did is they decided that they would go with all that they had all the way to Egypt and beg for some food, because they knew that the people in Egypt had food and they needed some in order to stay alive, because they had nothing at all. So they went all the way to Egypt, and oh my goodness, when they got there they saw Joseph. And you know, Joseph was really kind. Joseph didn't show them broken love, and he could have done, because they'd sold him. They'd thrown him down the hole, and then they sold him. But Joseph didn't do that. Joseph showed love. Joseph was a man who had a lot of love in his heart to give. And you know, the brothers were very sorry, and they said sorry to Joseph, and Joseph forgave them, and Joseph invited them to come and live in Egypt with him. And they also sent for Joseph's father, and can you imagine how happy Jacob was to see that his son, his favourite son, had not been killed after all. Wow. Do you know, what an amazing story. Joseph had a really hard time. He was first of all rejected by all of his brothers. He was beaten up and thrown into a hole. He was sold as a slave. Then Potiphar's wife lied about him and he was put into jail. And then finally he became the Pharaoh's best friend. And everything worked out really well. God had taken care of Joseph, and Joseph had helped all of the people in the land of Egypt, and he'd helped to save his family. He showed a lot of love. And of course God kept his promise, didn't he, to look after Joseph, even though some really tough things happened to Joseph. I wonder if we ever feel like Joseph, maybe some unfair things happen to us. I wonder if we're always ready to say that we forgive people for the broken love things that they show. I wonder if we're always ready to show love to others.